Hello. Today's video is a little different. Instead of going deep on one specific method, we're stepping back and answering the question that comes before any of them. Which pricing research tool should you actually use? There are 5 major pricing methods. They answer different questions, they need different data, and they work at different stages of a product's life. By the end of this, you'll have a clear decision framework, a way to look at any pricing question and know exactly which method to reach for. Let's start with the problem. Here's the challenge practitioners face. There are 5 serious pricing research methods: Van Westendorp, Gabor-Granger, Conjoint Analysis, Price Elasticity, and Promotional Elasticity. Each one is a legitimate, useful tool, but they're not interchangeable. Using the wrong method for a given situation means either wasting research budget on unnecessary complexity or under-researching a decision that needed more rigor. Getting it right means knowing what each method does, and more importantly, what question it's designed to answer. Here's the principle that organizes everything in this video. Each method answers a different pricing question. That sounds obvious, but it's surprising how often teams choose a method based on familiarity or habit rather than what they actually need to know. Van Westendorp and Conjoint both involve surveys about price, but they answer completely different questions. Price Elasticity and Gabor-Granger both produce a revenue optimal price, but they get there through completely different data and logic. The right choice depends on the question, and the question always comes first. Let's meet all 5. Van Westendorp answers, what price range is acceptable to consumers? Gabor-Granger answers, which specific price maximizes revenue? Conjoint Analysis answers, how do features and price trade off against each other? Price Elasticity answers, how does real demand respond to a price change? And Promotional Elasticity answers, how much does a temporary promotion boost volume, and is the lift worth the margin cost? 5 tools, 5 distinct questions. The next 5 slides go deeper on each one. Van Westendorp is where most pricing research should start. It answers the foundational question: what price range do consumers find acceptable for this product? The 4 survey questions: too cheap, bargain, getting expensive, too expensive, produce a price floor, a ceiling, an optimal point, and an implied market price. What makes it the right starting point is that it requires only a survey and a product concept, even a rough one, with no historical data and no complex design. What it doesn't give you: demand volume, revenue impact, or any sense of how product features affect price tolerance. Use it early, before you've committed to any specific price, to understand the playing field. Once Van Westendorp has given you a range, Gabor-Granger tells you where to price within it. It asks the consumers at each of several specific price points, would you buy at this price? The buy rates at each price, multiplied by the price, produce a revenue curve, and the peak of that curve is the revenue maximizing price. What it requires: a survey with specific prices drawn from your Van Westendorp range. What it doesn't tell you: how features affect price tolerance, or how real buyers behave at scale versus what they say in a survey. Use it when you have a specific price in mind and need to know which one maximizes revenue, with the Van Westendorp range already established. Conjoint analysis is the right tool when price is one of several product attributes you're trying to optimize simultaneously. Instead of just testing price in isolation, Conjoint shows respondents realistic product options with different combinations of features and prices, and asks them to choose. The output tells you how much each feature is worth in dollar terms and what the revenue optimal product price bundle is. What it requires: a more complex survey design and a larger sample than either Van Westendorp or Gabor-Granger. What it doesn't tell you: how the winning bundle will actually perform in the market, Use Conjoint when you're making both product design and pricing decisions at the same time, and you need to understand the trade-offs. Price elasticity is where the analysis shifts from survey-based to behavioral, from what people say they do to what they actually do. It uses historic sales and price data to calculate how much demand changes when price changes. A price elasticity of minus 1.5 means a 10% price increase produces a 15% volume decline. Multiply through and you know whether a price move will grow or shrink total revenue. What it requires? Typically 1 to 2 years of historical sales and pricing data, something new products or new brands don't yet have. What it doesn't tell you? Why consumers are sensitive at that price, or what will happen in a significantly different competitive environment. Use it when you have the data and you're evaluating a real pricing decision with real stakes. Promotional elasticity is price elasticity applied specifically to temporary price discounts. The 20% off promotion, the buy one get one deal, the limited time markdown. It measures how much volume increases during a promotion and whether that lift justifies the margin cost. The math works the same way as regular price elasticity, but promotions always produce much higher elasticity coefficients than permanent price changes. Consumers respond strongly to a visible sale. What it requires? The same historical sales data as price elasticity, with promotional periods clearly identified. The critical limitation? Promotional volume lifts are largely temporary. When the promotion ends, most of the extra volume disappears because it attracted deal seekers who don't convert to loyal regular buyers. Use promotional elasticity to optimize your trade spends, not to grow your customer base. Here's the decision framework that puts it all together. Start with one question. Do you have 1 or 2 years of historical data? If yes, you can run price elasticity and promotional elasticity. You're working with real behavior rather than stated intent. If no, you're in survey territory. Next question, are you optimizing price and product features together? If yes, Conjoint Analysis is the right tool. If no, next question, do you have a specific revenue optimal price point? If yes, Gabor-Granger. After establishing the range with Van Westendorp, if the only question is understanding the acceptable range, Van Westendorp alone gets you there. Follow the branches. The right method is always clear once you've answered those 3 questions honestly. While the decision framework tells you which method to use for a given question, it's worth understanding how the methods build on each other when you're doing comprehensive pricing research. Van Westendorp first. It establishes the acceptable range and gives you price points to test. Gabor-Granger second. It finds the revenue peak within that range. Conjoint third. If you're also optimizing features, it tells you how the product bundle affects willingness to pay. Price elasticity fourth. Post-launch. It validates the chosen price against real demands. And promotional elasticity alongside price elasticity to make sure your trade spend is generating real returns. Each layer adds information. None of them is sufficient on its own for a high-stakes pricing decision. Knowing the limitations is as important as knowing what each method does. Van Westendorp tells you the range, but it doesn't model demand, volume, or revenue. You can't use it alone to predict what will happen to your business at a given price. Gabor-Granger gives you the revenue optimal price, but doesn't account for how features affect price tolerance or what competitors are doing. Conjoint captures stated preferences, not actual purchase behavior, which tends to overstate consumers' willingness to pay features they claim to value. Price elasticity is backward-looking. It reflects the past conditions that produce your historical data, not necessarily what happens in a changed competitive environment. And promotional elasticity captures volume lifts but not loyalty conversion. Every method has blind spots. The limitations tell you when to add to a second method. Here's a step that gets skipped in most pricing research programs. Qualitative research before any quantitative pricing study. Before you design a Van Westendorp survey or pick price points for Gabor-Granger, talking to consumers in focus groups or one-on-one interviews helps you understand the emotional and functional research behind price sensitivity. Why does a $7.99 price feel too expensive for this product? Is it the absolute number, the price relative to competitors, a mismatch between the price signal and the product's perceived quality? Qualitative research answers those questions, which makes every subsequent quantitative survey more targeted and more useful. It's not a replacement for the quantitative methods, it's the foundation that makes them sharper. Let's make this concrete. Oatwave is launching a new premium oat milk variant that first needs to set the right price before it goes to retail. Here's how they'd sequence the methods. First, Van Westendorp. Is $7.99 within the acceptable price range for a premium plant-based milk variant? That sets the playing field. Second, Gabor-Granger. Within the acceptable range, does $6.49 or $7.49 maximize revenue? That narrows it to a specific number. Third, Conjoint. How much does adding an organic certification claim or a barista-grade positioning shift willingness to pay? That tells them whether the premium features can support the premium price. And fourth, after launch, price elasticity. Is the real demand response at $7.49 matching what the survey predicted? Discovery, then optimization, then feature trade-offs, then real-world validation. 4 methods in sequence, each one building on the one before. One final point worth making explicitly. Knowing 5 pricing methods doesn't mean using all 5 for every pricing decision. The risk of having a full toolkit is over-engineering decisions that don't warrant it. A startup pricing their first product doesn't need conjoint analysis and price elasticity modeling. They need a Van Westendorp survey and maybe a quick Gabor-Granger test. A CPG brand adjusting the price of an existing SKU with 2 years of sales data doesn't need a new survey. They need a price elasticity calculation. Saving the complex methods for complex decisions. Match the method to what the decision actually requires. The goal of pricing research isn't to do the most sophisticated analysis possible, it's to make a better pricing decision than you'd make without it. 6 things to take with you. Each method answers a different pricing question. Always let the question drive the method choice. For range, start with Van Westendorp. For the revenue optimal point, follow with Gabor-Granger. When features and price need to be optimized together, use conjoint. When you have historical sales data, use price elasticity. It's behavioral, not stated intent. The 5 methods built on each other in a sequence for comprehensive pricing research. And don't over-engineer. A simple decision needs a simple method, and matching the rigor to the stakes is part of doing this well. Thank you for watching.